Welcome to the Division HQ. Joining me today, as always, is James Duggan, Brandon Tyrell.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about the Division story, now that we've hit level 30, what we thought of it. We're going to be talking about what to do once you hit level 30, and we're going to be talking about the end game of the Division. You can watch this show on Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and of course the IGN mobile app, so be sure to check us out there. And thank you for all the kind reviews on iTunes. Guys, let's get right into it, talking about the story. I really liked how it ramped up the sort of set pieces and big moments. What did you guys think?
I mean, how spoilery are we getting right now?
Full spoilers, so spoiler warning up front.
Totally agree. I wish that there were more encounters like the last one of General Assembly where you fight a helicopter.
Oh, yeah, right. We joked about that. We said a tank.
A tank.
I'm like,
I
it
was
could
so
be
close.
a helicopter.
Yeah, well, there was that thing discovered in the DLC, right? Like, fight a tank or exclamation mark. I wish there were bigger set pieces like that because I think that's what the Division was missing later on. A lot of times, enemy types got increasingly more difficult, from guys running at you with axes to shotguns to like fully automatic shotguns. But they were all kind of the same. And fighting a helicopter was really like the first thing that you did that was different.
It broke it up.
Yeah, it broke it up to where it was something new, and I wasn't really sure how to fight this thing at first, I liked it. I thought the stories got stronger the farther it went, and I would have liked to see more of that. The narrative beats and stuff were great, and that last sort of cinematic where Amherst is talking about the virus in particular, I thought that was amazing, and I would have loved for that real dark and sort of apocalyptic tone to be in more of the game.
Yeah, I think narratively it ramped up, and then mechanically it ramped up, and both of those culminated in that ending, which I think is great. That being said, I think the ending helicopter fight, while really cool, and while it did have some light mechanics like activate these turrets and then shoot it, I'd like to see more mechanical depth. There's an enormity of things they can use. Well, there's an enormity of things they can use for reference for that, of mechanically difficult fights from previous games into this genre. And I would like to see in the incursions like 3 or 4 boss encounters per incursion of that mechanical depth or greater. And then talking about the narrative beat at the end there, like going into that room, I had no idea what I was going to expect.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like going around every corner with my gun ready.
Yeah.
And then when I just saw an empty, kind of like, oh my God, this is where it all started, isn't it?
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah,
I really like that.
I think that last echo where Keener?
I don't remember.
Adam Keener
Yeah, Keener.
was talking to you point blank. I thought that was one of the most powerful moments of the game.
I was definitely gripped.
Yeah.
Because you're like, what happened here? And you want to know more, and he delivers this.
You see the body on the floor, and you see him sitting in the chair, and then he kind of moves through, telling you what his plans are. I mean, it's a total sequel setup.
And that bombshell about the dark zone,
Yeah.
I did not see that coming. I thought that was really cool, that the Division agents kind of came in, loved the anarchy of the whole place, and they were like, well, let's just have this forever with the dark zone, or at least they wanted their own walled off section that was free of conventional
They got
rule.
basically left behind, right? Like they went in there to take care of things and then got abandoned. And so I think that's sort of where Adam Keener became dejected and started this whole, I'm going to weaponize it. And, if power is the only currency in New York now and he's got the virus, he's the most powerful person in New York.
Yeah, for me, the gameplay in those final few missions, it was really, really cool. And the people that I was playing with, they were like, we're going to go to the United Nations. I'm so excited. It was the UN building, right?
Yeah, the UN building.
Yeah, so we go in there, they're like, this is exactly what it was like when I went there and everything. We actually did a really good comparison piece.
Yeah, that's really, really
Real
cool.
New York versus in-game New York.
It's uncanny.
Yeah, check it out on IGN. The full video, but yeah, like it's moments like that where it's sort of like larger than life. Something big is going to happen if you're going to the UN, and it does. You fight a giant helicopter, and I like that. I hope to see more of that.
Sure. Leading up to that with the Russian consulate mission, I really liked how we were talking about like baseball bats, then axes, then shotguns, and my God, there's nothing more brutal than shotguns in challenge mode. But they're way harder than even the final boss. But I like how it ramped up. And even like the side missions got more mechanically interesting, even though it was a little bit too slow for my taste, and they were a little bit too similar from the things we were doing at the start of the game. By the end of the game, I definitely felt as though I got the game was giving me more to like, we trust you and we trust your intelligence and what you're capable of as a player.
I totally agree. I think the majority of the Division is sort of a one-note Johnny, where it does one thing, but it does it really, really well. And then later on in the missions, it started to get a little more like you said, trusting. Like when you fight other Division agents, first wave agents like Hornet and Domino, and there's one other guy, I can't remember his name. Like those fights were very interesting to me. I would have liked to see an entire room full of Division agents. Can you imagine, like, you know,
Yeah,
every
like a council
every
kind of
video
fight.
game does the dark mirror, like, you know.
Yeah.
So
Shadow
your
Link.
squad versus your squad versus the Shadow Squad.
Oh, that'd
and
be
like
so
you
great.
four just go at it. Like I'm thinking Seeker Mines and support stations and ballistic shields. I would have loved to see that encounter. And who knows, maybe Keener has got 3 friends in the DLC that you're going to run up against.
Sorry,
but
totally quick sidebar
I would
here.
love to see that.
And we're talking about, you know, giving players more in terms of complexity. There was one mission, my least favorite mission in Structure was when you have to activate the virus scanners and go around.
Oh,
and there was
God.
one virus scanner mission that totally threw a curveball, which at the start I was furious, and by the end I was like, that was actually kind of fun. Where you go into a mall and you can see the second scanner behind a mesh thing that's like a closed department store. And you're like, how the hell do I get in here? And then you go down to the basement, you have to activate a keyboard completely without any kind of
Yeah.
UI cue, and then it brings the gate up and you're able to go in there, but like, they needed way more of that. But I
Just
was
changing up how you
exactly,
get to
and I was kind of mad that they threw one at you because it was kind of like that, you know, the game that has one jump scare. It's like,
Yeah.
why would you do that? You
I
know,
mean,
like
it's
at
super,
least have 2.
It's super effective. That jump scare is super effective, right? Because there's only one in the game.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah, I agree. There was one. It was a big school, and it was a virus supply mission. And there was one behind a closed door. And if you're used to doing these virus supply
them in
missions,
the open.
you just go up
Right.
the apartment building, and then you find them all, and then you upload the virus or whatever. And this one, you had to like go and actually open a door and like go behind and find it behind a door. And I was like,
At least it's changed it enough.
it's such a small
guess.
thing that it threw me off because the pattern had been so established already.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I guess both a strength and a weakness of those kind of things. But I agree, those
Yeah.
virus supply missions got very
Tedious,
similar
redundant.
over
Yeah.
over time.
For me, I definitely really like the final mission and what was shown to us there. But overall, how do you feel about the story? I mean, for me, for the most part, it was just kind of white noise as I was going through it. But then that last mission, I'm like, oh, there's something here.
I think that specifically the like quest givers at each hub or safe house, they all had an interesting personality, or for the most part, they all had like a little quirk.
It was so
Like,
brief, though. I
one
guess I
guy's-
wanted
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. There are these things that set up ambiance and set up atmosphere, but the narrative, the main narrative thread there felt very underdeveloped until the end, in which case you're like, okay, that was kind of
Yeah.
okay. But at least it was not a total miss like Destiny was for me,
Yeah,
which
definitely.
was just non-existent. Like there was a story there is a universe here, and I do kind of believe in it, but that being said, it was pretty weak the whole time.
Yeah. Brandon, your overall take?
Yeah, I agree. I thought, by and large, the 3 wings of the narrative, the medical, tech, and security wings, were really they didn't feel cohesive.
You're
I
not
know-
connected too much to those characters.
I know they're supposed to be their own branches, with Dr. Kendall and the other 2.
Joey Meatballs.
Joey Meatballs. But it got to a point where you would do a couple missions and you would get a cutscene, and then you would do a couple more missions, and it would just feel like these cutscenes were really just kind of padding, and the missions themselves were going here and turning the lights on was one thing, and going here and
Water.
stopping
There's a lot of light.
stopping the cleaners from wiping out a shanty town was another thing, right? And those were all like little things that you're doing to help rebuild New York City. But the larger narrative that I thought really came to fruition later on in the game, the Keener story, the Amherst story, the doctor, the Russian guy, all of that stuff was really the point of the story for me, right? Like that was really interesting. The finding out the cause of the green poison and finding out the sort of domestic terrorism that was going on inside, the division. That kind of stuff I felt like could have used a little more injected into the individual sort of beats of the story as we were going through. Because like James said, a lot of it was just getting stuff done. And then in the end, it's like, this is what it's all been leading to. And it's like, well, I had no idea.
And God, I hate Fei Lao. I really do. I just have it. She's the least likable character that I can remember in any game that I've ever played.
Yeah,
she just
pretty
takes
just-
credit for everything you do. Backseat driver. Like it's like I don't care about rescuing people. We have a division. Like who are you taking these orders from?
And yet
Anyway.
she asked you to go find her cellist sister.
Yeah, right.
Good musician
Abuse
sister.
of power.
Yeah.
I totally should have not done that. Been like, no,
I still haven't.
you hypocrite. No,
That side mission's still waiting.
I refuse.
So we've all played through the story. We've all hit level 30. I haven't really started my post level 30 gameplay yet. So I asked Duggan to write up a few tips for us. Duggan, what do you got?
Here are 7 things to do when you hit level 30. We discovered that rerunning General Assembly, the final mission in the game, drops the same amount of superior gear as the first time you do it, so you can rerun that to your heart's content as soon as you hit level 30. Daily hard modes you can queue for as soon as you hit level 30 as well, since gear isn't really a requirement for that. Your daily challenge missions should be next in your queue, but are very difficult. Some missions are easier than others. For example, I was able to complete the Lexington Event Center on my first day at 30, but struggled with the Russian consulate even after I was pretty well geared. Take abilities that benefit your group as opposed to yourself in challenge mode, especially when you aren't that geared. After you've completed your daily missions, it's time to head into the Dark Zone, which, despite what you've heard and what the name would imply, really isn't that dangerous. Stay in DZ 01 and 02 and farm mobs to your heart's content. The goal here is to hit DZ level 30 and 50 to unlock the ability to purchase gear with the Phoenix credits you've earned from your dailies. Enemies get harder and higher level the further north you go, but provide little more experience for how incredibly difficult they become. So sticking to the southern regions makes sense for now. The 3 aforementioned activities make up the brunt of your daily grind for now, but there are still a few things you'll need to do now that you're 30. Recalibrating your level 31 gear that rolled the wrong primary attribute is worth your time and money. So, for instance, let's say you get gloves with electronics on it, but you need firearms to hit a requirement for a talent on your weapon. Go to the recalibration station in your base of operations and change the primary attribute for a modest fee. Purchasing named gear allows you total control over your early endgame progression, and while crafting seems to have the most legs, you won't need to fiddle around with worrying about random stats and talent rolls if you purchase named high-end gear from various vendors. Finally, purchasing blueprints and crafting is the progression system with the longest legs and biggest payout, but as the talents and rolls you get on the gear are random, you'll need to invest some time and resources to see a payout.
Thanks, Duggan. That gives me an idea of what to do. Brandon, what was the first thing you did?
Went to bed.
Yeah, right.
It was late, but I guess the first thing I did in the game after I hit 30, I went back to the base of operations almost immediately because I was expecting to see the big red button that said, "I'm 30 now, give me my gear," or "Tell me what to do."
Yeah.
And that wasn't really there. You had that screen pop up that said, when you finish the main story. I had to grind for a couple hours after that to max out to 30, but after that, the first thing I really did was just go to the mission menu, and it was a little disappointing to me. I went to the mission menu.
Clear out your side quests.
Yeah.
Clear out your missions to level up your base all the way.
100%. I went to the mission menu, and I was like, I'm level 30. Let's start. And it was like, oh, but first I have to finish off some of these JTF missions.
Yeah.
And then I'll do a hard mission, but it's still the same mission that I did before. I got to go back to Lexington, but on hard mode now, It felt like I was expecting this big leap forward, and it was like just the next step on the same staircase, But yeah, I did a couple hard missions and then went to the Dark Zone for about a half hour and left.
Yeah. I'm ready to go to the Dark Zone to
Yeah.
figure out what that's all about. What did you do, Duggan?
So I actually, a lot of people I knew just went straight to 30 as fast as they could, kind of letting their events and missions fall by the wayside, but I kind of figured out, okay, this is all tied to your progression. There's an invisible progression here with your base, so skipping all these side missions is really only hurting your experience when you get to 30, and you're going to have to go do all this meaningless, tedious garbage as soon as you hit 30.
Well,
but
with a super-powered rifle.
Yeah, sure. So I did the hard modes. I actually did a challenge mission my first day, Lexington Event Center, which... if you were able to detach yourself from how incredibly bullet spongy that is, incredibly, to the point where 4 people are unloading 500 rounds apiece into a dude's head, and he's totally fine. Once you detach yourself from that, and look at it as an RPG encounter, it is challenging. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
I've had some fun moments where I'm like, specifically, I can't remember the mission, but it's like a power station, and it's the only mission in the game where you have a timer to complete an objective, and that on challenge mode is brutally fun.
The Warren Gate power plant?
Yeah. And so I did that on challenge mode, and we just barely, 17 seconds, completed it. It was probably the best PvE experience I've had in that game. But then on the flip side of that, doing the Russian consulate mission, you'll be fighting a boss, and then just door will pop open, 5 shotgun guys, nothing you can do.
I will say, the Warren Gate power plant, I did it on challenging, I think the day that I turned 30. And the very first time you encounter, the gates swing open, you shoot one of the guys, and 6 shotgunners come out, followed by 4 grenadiers, followed by 3 captains, and a couple LMG guys. And I'm just, there's nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. You're just sitting there behind cars like, I'm going to die eventually.
Yeah, and I guess that's
brutal.
like the PvE meta is like, okay, let's all pop our tactical abilities
Initially.
Yeah, to destroy the shotgun guys because they don't have that much health, but they're just so brutally difficult and they do so much damage. I really think it's kind of a cheap mechanism. It's a little bit of a cheap encounter. I think the things that and the shield guys for the LMB are just like the ultimate brick wall in terms of it's just a war of attrition when you fight those guys. That being said, some of the boss encounters are fun. Again, that I think those timed encounters, I think keeping people on their feet. I really dislike when the game forces you to back into a corner and just defend from that corner, which seems to be what it does in challenge mode. But I went into the Dark Zone. I actually had a great experience initially with PvP because I was level 0. I was like, look, if there's ever a time for me to go rogue, it's right now because I stand nothing to lose. And I went manhunt with a friend and we survived it, and it was a really good introduction. And I had really high hopes, and then I started doing the Dark Zone grind and realized it's just another big PvE zone.
There's not a lot of incentive to go rogue anymore. The
There's
penalty's too great.
There's a huge deterrent to go rogue.
Yeah.
After you start grinding, and I actually feel for people who accidentally go rogue and get killed, because that's literally hours of their progression down the drain. The Dark Zone for me has been incredibly ups and downs from closed beta, it was great, open beta, it was terrible. Launch, my first experience was great, and now that I kind of see it for what it is, I'm really disappointed with that.
So let's actually move into our
Sure.
final topic, and the final topic is Division's endgame kind of a mess right now? This is based on a Forbes article where they argue that it's totally messy right now and not what they envisioned. What do you think?
Day one, I was like, there's a very defined progression here, and they really tell you what to do when that screen pops up. And I was like, I feel pretty good about this. You know, it's like, do your hard mission, do your challenge mission, go into the Dark Zone. And now having 3 or 4 days under my belt, that article hits the nail on the head in almost all respects. I'm not really too concerned about that whole, a lot of people got Phoenix credits early due to some kind of exploit or misbalancing. That doesn't really irk me because I think the Phoenix credit progression right now is okay. I think
it's what it should be.
Sure.
Initially, there was a way to just get like 14 a pop or so. You know?
Each.
It was super easy to get them, so a bunch of people like maxed out super fast, and they're like, "Whoops!" Patched.
So there's two ways to do it: hard missions and challenge mode missions, and those award about. I believe at the time they awarded about 10 Phoenix credits. But named bosses would drop anywhere from 10 to 15 Phoenix credits. So just doing a loop in the Dark Zone of named bosses, a lot of people hit the invisible cap wall of 1,000 Phoenix credits, and at that point you have an entire set of high-end gear.
You're done. You beat the
and
game.
You beat the division.
Absolutely.
You beat the division in 2 days. And so, like you, I'm not really concerned with it because A, I don't care if other players get there first, and B, PvP is a non-starter right now. Like it's
really
just
is.
there's no reason to attack other players in the Dark Zone outside of griefing or just kind of being an a-hole.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, and you know those people like haters are gonna hate, right? Like those people are gonna do that anyway. But like Duggan was saying, you know, at level 30 in the Dark Zone, you die as a rogue or, oh God, worse, as a manhunt. You could lose, you know, upwards of 40,000 experience. Like
Which
that's
translates to time.
hours of work. Like when a game mechanic forces you to lose 3 hours of the game,
Needs to be tweaked.
Working as intended. Let me preface that. A game mechanic that's working as intended forces you to lose hours of the game for a reward that is, you know, exponentially smaller than the risk. I think that is a problem, and I think right now going rogue in the Dark Zone, and you know, because the Dark Zone is all about going rogue and surviving in there with this tension with other players, because that kernel of going rogue is broken, I think the Dark Zone is broken right now. Right now, it's just a high-level PvE grinding area.
I feel like such a hipster for saying this, but my God, was it fun in the closed beta. That was before some rebalancing happened, and basically they had mobs gave you almost nothing in terms of your experience and funds, and players gave you everything. And dying as a player was significant even if you weren't a rogue. And that established the Dark Zone as this, like, it felt like the Dark Zone. It felt terrifying to be in there. It felt dangerous. It was akin to DayZ, it was akin to Rust, but it was a little bit more organized than that, and it wasn't as brutal when you died. But that was like the intended environment for it. And now the way that they've balanced it is it is like you said before, like you're losing hours, and that's, not great. But especially when those 4 hours of gameplay are 4 hours of monotonous grinding mobs. It's not 4 hours of good, fun, emergent PvP gameplay you've lost. It's 4 hours of just like, man, why am I even continuing to do this?
And if you get killed, you still lose that, right?
Yeah.
It's the same scenario.
If
So if somebody goes rogue on you,
You lose
well,
less.
no, you
lose
lose
less.
You lose
Okay.
significantly less.
Going rogue is just dying as a rogue. There's a big penalty tax put on it,
Got it.
right?
Sure.
But if you die, you still lose some experience and some
But not
currency,
nearly
but
as
not
much.
nearly as bad. Which
Got
is
it.
why there's no incentive to going rogue. Which is why the whole point of the Dark Zone is sort of moot.
I have to give a shout out to the clip of that one player though that saw 11 people literally in
man.
a circle.
That was amazing.
he actually let us use the clip for the show today, and it's on IGN. You can check it out.
This is great.
He throws a grenade and then he pops his power and kills all 11 of them.
Yeah.
And then he like extract. But they got their revenge. He goes
They did.
around a corner. He sees literally all of them coming back. He's like, "Oh God!" And he tried to get away, but ended up dying. But it's just such a fantastic clip. Do you guys feel that temptation to ever go rogue when those opportunities arise?
I mean, that's like akin to like being a teenager and being like,
Yeah.
it's like midnight right now. I'm on an empty highway. And then when you become an adult, you're like, I have too much responsibility to do something that stupid. Because and it should be fun. That should be incentivized. If you see all those people there, that should absolutely be.
it should be a temptation.
It should be like, especially when they're all so clustered together. There should be no deterrent from having you do that, because it would be such a boon, and all those people were so clumped together, and it was such a big no-no for them in terms of that kind of PvP dangerous game, that like we should all feel tempted to do that. But honestly, if I did that, that's just me throwing the past like day of me grinding the Dark Zone, which isn't that fun, by the way, out the window.
I was thinking about this. I was thinking, what scenario would I be in where I would feel comfortable going rogue? And I think the only scenario right now was if there was one person and he had just looted a named boss. Like if it was just me and another neutral agent, we just killed a boss together. I went and looted, he went and looted. I would consider killing him and taking his loot because it's just one person. So going rogue, level 1, is not going to be as bad for me.
It's only
as-
like 60 seconds or 80 seconds.
Yeah,
or
so
something.
I could probably run for 60 seconds and then lose rogue
Yeah. Sure.
status.
Especially if you
But
haven't
rank
seen a lot
5,
of
it's
players.
5 minutes.
Yeah, there's no
You're dead.
There's no
Yeah.
reason to attack more than one player ever. Like it's just the risk, the reward is not there. But if I see a guy, I know he's got decent gear because he just killed a boss. It's only one guy. I could probably get away. I think that's the only scenario in which I would feel comfortable going rogue right now.
I completely echo that sentiment, but that being said, after spending a couple hours in the Dark Zone, purple gear just isn't interesting anymore.
Yeah.
it's all
high-end.
about grinding the high-end
Once you
gear.
get that taste.
You very quickly, you immediately, as soon as you hit 30, completely out-level blues,
Yeah.
and then you very quickly, there's level 31 items, which are like a little bit better in terms of their base stat rolls, but as soon as you get a couple of those and get a couple high ends under your belt, the gear that the bosses drop, and you find, especially the ones you find in chests in the Dark Zone, is just not interesting to you. It only serves as a very marginal upgrade. So that incentive is not there for me to kill that player, even if I knew he had like 2 or 3 purples on him, because honestly, like effectively, that's not going to change anything on my paper doll. So
Sure.
So overall take, guys. Endgame, do you like it? Yes or no? Brandon?
No.
No. Okay.
Yeah, I have to agree right now. It's a no for me. That being said, I could totally see the potential, and I feel like a lot of this comes from having spent so much time in the Dark Zone and closed beta. It was a totally different burn back then, and maybe it was just because the player psychology was different back then, because it was a limited run. But I feel like there's a sweet spot for the Dark Zone, and I see the potential because that is, hopefully, at its core, potentially an infinitely replayable, emergent zone where that kind of like buffers the time difference. In Destiny, you don't really have that, right? You have content coming 1 or 2 months down the line in terms of a new incursion or what have you. The Dark Zone can help fill that time and keep the player base active for that span of no content, because it's, you're never going to have the same experience if it's balanced properly.
Sure, but in a game where the end game is all about progression, about getting better gear, there's no reason to do that in the Dark Zone.
Sure, as it stands now. I think it needs tuning, but I think they have an idea there. I'm very, very, extremely cautiously optimistic that with some patches, with incursions down the line, there could be an end game that makes sense, but right now, absolutely not.
And don't get me wrong, I don't dislike the act of playing the end game. I find it just right, like literally 45 minutes ago, I crafted a high-end marksman rifle, and I can't wait to go use that, right?
Yeah.
I enjoy the act of playing the end game. I just don't like the structure of it. I'm still engaged by it. I'm still engaged of getting the new gear and leveling up and turning myself into this min-max monster. But the actual act of knowing this is all that is going to be there, without the Dark Zone, without the incursions until April, I think, it's frustrating.
Yeah, definitely. Guys, thank you for joining me. That's the end of our show, unfortunately. Thank you for joining us. This is an experiment, so if you like the show, be sure you're sharing it with your friends, tweeting about it, leaving us a review on iTunes. We really appreciate it. Thanks for listening. This has been The Division HQ.